Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Poet Speaks podcast. Don't forget the number one spoken word poetry podcast in the world. And our next guest is a queer, non binary immigrant poet and licensed clinical social worker. They're born in Zacatecas, Mexico, and reside in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. Their work has previously been featured in Razor Cake issue number 102, Sister Spit, QTPOC Cruising the West Tour, Aladena Literary Review 2020, A Case of Personhood and Innate Divinity Books, Case of Personhood Trees Anthology of Poetry, and the upcoming short film Shadows at Night. They're an alum of the Community Literature Initiative, and their debut full-length collection of poetry, Belonging, is now on World Stage Press. Welcome to the Poet Speaks podcast, Oombi Solis Flores. Oombi, how are you?
Hey, thank you so much. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Now, please tell me, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Is it Ombi?
Close. It's Umbi.
Umbi. Okay, Umbi. Thank you so much. I really, you know what? I always want to get people's names correctly, and I really, really want that to be heard in the podcast, mistakes and all. But there we go. Umbi, thank you so much for being a phenomenal guest on the podcast. Now, first and foremost, let's start off. Where is your location? Give us latitude, longitude. No, I'm just kidding. Where are you currently at in the world right now?
It's a little bit turning into grinder. People are gonna find me.
Yeah.
No, I'm in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, which is like occupied Tatavium lands out here in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, which is I believe it's like 20-ish miles north of Los Angeles. So pretty close to LA, but I'm near like the foothill areas.
Okay, for sure. No, that's pretty nice. No, I always hesitate asking people, but I always think it gives good perspective because currently right now I film this show all over when I was living in Japan, Minnesota, now I'm in New York. So it's always gives good perspective on how far poetry can take us. We can be reaching across all these different lines. So yeah, how is it? How are y'all doing out there? Weather? I mean, what's it like right now? I know there was some storms. You doing okay?
Yeah, doing all right. It was like 4 or 5 days of just like rain nonstop. I believe this. Yeah, I'm looking out the window from the door. The sun is out today. It's a little chilly, a little windy, but so much better than the past couple of days. So doing really well. How are things out there in New York?
You know what? We're unprecedented. It's nice and sunny today. We're still, I guess,
Nice.
Groundhog Day happened and we have not had the bad snow that we usually have. So that I'm thankful for. The sun makes me happy. So there we go. Yeah. So tell me a bit about your background. Now, I really, and again, forgive me for butchering your name, born in Zacatecas, Mexico. I know I butchered that. But tell me, correct pronunciation and tell me about that region of Mexico and what was it like growing up there?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thanks for trying. And I love that you mentioned earlier that, you attempt and you correct and you show that as an example for our listeners and viewers, because that's really what we can all try to do, right? To
Absolutely.
attempt and correct and learn. So yeah, so Zacatecas is like a northern mid state in Mexico. My parents are actually from a neighboring state called Durango. I believe at the time my dad had some sort of business in the neighboring state, so I was a C-section, so I was like pre-planned because I was
Mm.
born around like the Christmas like Christian holidays. So they gave my parents the option of like, we can do this on the 24th or we can wait a day and do it on the 26th. And they decided to wait. And yeah, I was born on the 26th. I believe it was like a converted like nun hospital. My mom
Oh,
always tells me the story because it was very cold and chilly at the time. So every time I kind of complain about me being cold or, when it's not that cold, she's like, it makes sense because you were born in that climate. Um, but yeah, I didn't really grow up out there. I've been to Durango and other areas in Mexico where my mom's family is currently, living in. But I mostly brought me over to the States when I was very young. They crossed me over. It was twice. So once when I was like 2 years old, and then another time when I was like 5 or 6. Um, so it's a mixture of like migration and growing up undocumented and having that kind of background, I think that informs my experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm curious, how did poetry find you? Or did you find poetry? At what stage was it? Would you say
Mhm,
when you were in childhood, as you were, you know, moving across the
mhm.
different, obviously different countries? Where did the poetry? How did poetry intersect and find you in your life, or did you find it in your life?
Yeah, I think growing up, we were, very working class, so I didn't I wasn't really exposed to poetry other than like,
Mm,
assigned readings in high school. We moved around a lot even here in the States. So um yeah, that was never really something I experienced aside from, maybe some poems from like Edgar Allan Poe or like Sandra Cisneros, like House on Mango Street that was taught in high school. I always remember that as one of the books that I was like very much attracted to and actually read for class.
yeah.
But I think I found poetry more as an adult. I know when I was like in middle school, I would write more like horror type of like short stories. Obviously, probably reading it now is more like fan fiction, but that was like my introduction to writing, and then poetry found me, or I found it more as an adult when I was in college. With more contemporary authors, like Jessica Salgado and Faye Hernandez and folks that I know now like Andy Sanchez from the Community Literature Initiative. So that's kind of how I found it. I think it was me seeking some sort of like self care as I was getting
Mm,
through to school and just through life stuff. And it
mm.
was just very easily accessible and relatable, and kind of a window into other people's experiences that really attracted me to it.
Absolutely. No, I love that idea of finding writing as that form of self care. I kind of want to harken back to your
Mhm,
cultural upbringing is Mexican, correct?
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Mhm,
Tell us a bit about how that cultural upbringing has affected your poetry. I think for
mhm,
me, my understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, there is such a machismo is what I've
mhm,
heard people describe some parts of Mexican culture. For
mhm,
you, did you is that accurate? And how did that affect your kind of being in the arts? I mean, a lot of people
mhm,
don't look at the arts necessarily as well. Just being from an immigrant family myself, looking at the arts as something as a palatable form of actual money making, whatever may
mhm,
have you, right? Career. But in addition to, there's I guess the machismo maybe of different cultures, bringing that into now you're writing poetry. How has your cultural background affected you as a poet and as an artist yourself?
mhm. Oh, that's so real. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you're an immigrant, you can totally relate to, um, you know, I think I grew up with my parents with their decision to come to the States and, wanting a better quote unquote life of and more opportunity, which, obviously as we grow up in the States, we kind of see the more of a reality rather than that fantasy and that dream that our parents come here with. But
Mm,
yeah, definitely, you know, uh, toxic masculinity and machismo is part of many different cultures and definitely was rooted in my family life along with a lot of like religious trauma from colonization, Catholicism, and all that type of like very embedded things in Mexican culture. So I definitely grew up with that. um, and I think that's part of the reason why I found poetry so late in life because
mm,
growing up, I had to quickly decide like what is my own dream here in this country, and what is something I can do that can pay the bills and can also offer support for my family because that was just the reality, right? So I never found myself thinking, when I was writing those stories when I was younger, like never in my I guess spoken out loud dreams was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a writer and I'm gonna focus on my art. It was always like, what can I do that kind of aligns with what I like that can pay bills and support family. So I think that definitely contributed to my finding poetry so late in life.
for sure.
And that's part of like kind of what I wrote in my bio. Like, I and my day job is like social work. So it's aligned with my own values, but it also it's a way to survive as well here in the States.
Absolutely. Prior to folks that don't know, prior to us starting the podcast, we were actually discussing, your amazing full length collection, Belonging. I'm curious, how have your parents, how was your family, how have they kind of received that work? Now you have this beautiful full length collection. You're getting your flowers. How have your parents? Have they been a support? What is their kind of idea around it, seeing from their background, seeing you now engaged so fully in your poetry?
Mm-hmm. Ah, that's a that's a deep question. Jeez. And I'm glad you asked it because I think it's a very real experience for like children of immigrants and like other
Yeah.
queer people where like I don't necessarily keep in touch with my dad. So I don't necessarily know if he knows that, his offspring put out a book that's very queer and pink and out there. And with my mom, it's a different story. She's had her journey, in accepting queerness, but she's as of now very supportive, very loving, and she knows the book is there. I've showed it to her when it came out. I don't know if she's read it, but I know she's very proud of me regardless if she has or not. So I'm not too concerned on that side. Maybe one day if I do have the opportunity to like talk with my dad again, then maybe he'll find out
Hmm.
that he has a very queer child with a very queer book out in the world, and we'll see how that goes.
No, for sure. I always say, because I know my parents were Nigerian immigrants. So,
Mhm.
I always tell people, I actually think my parents' dreams for me were not big enough, because I
Mm,
really do believe a lot of when you have that immigrant background, the idea of, and I can only speak from my experience, the idea of survival is just so keen on everything that you do. You just want your kids to survive, so go into a field where I know that you can just have a job, right? And I think it's like the idea of, I always say, for us as immigrant kids, just my mom and dad's dreams just weren't big enough for me. My mother's dreams
mm,
weren't big enough for me. I couldn't fit into it because I had bigger plans for my life than she could even, or he could even imagine, right? And I'm
mm,
curious, what for you, what has your experience been anywhere close to that, in terms of maybe your family not even seeing how far you could go with even a career in the arts, or with writing? I mean, have you ever kind of had that same kind of realization? My parents, I'm their flowers, but at the end of the day, they didn't see that I could be a whole tree. If that makes any sense,
mm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah, you definitely speak to my heart in that, and how you phrase all of that. Yeah, that's so real. Yeah, sometimes I think, well, at least for let me see, how am I gonna process this mentally and speak it?
Mm.
It's still pretty early over here. Um, yeah, I think I grew up with that thought of the states have opportunity. You can do what you want here. You can, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like their dreams were big for me, but maybe limited in scope. Maybe, the garden where they planted me was enough to like grow and expand my roots, but I had to take my roots in my own self and plant it somewhere else, and maybe a bigger garden with no like borders or lines defining how far I could reach. So that's a very great question and great way to visualize it. I think for all of our immigrant listeners that can kind of relate to having
No,
that type of childhood and expectations I think our parents kind of put on us.
absolutely, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your name, Umbi. That's such a
Mhm.
unique, beautiful name. Tell us a little bit about, what does your name mean?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so it's not my legal name for y'all wondering out there. I always get get that question. Yeah, it's not my government name. It's not my given name. I think that side of my queerness growing up, I never really related to my name. So I've always had different nicknames or things that, uh, that other friends or people close to me kind of called me growing up that kind of just stuck. And similar to this, Umbi is a name that if you know my legal name, it kind of matches in a way in some of the way it sounds. This was maybe like 6, 7 years ago. One of my friends just started calling me Umbi, and our
Mm,
mutual friends kind of just stuck with it, and people just were calling me that, and I was responding to it, and it just felt right.
mm.
Um, I don't know if it'll feel right for the rest of my life, but for now, it has. It's felt correct. Um, but yeah, we'll see how that changes. I like the idea of um, gender and orientation and all that stuff being fluid, and I think that kind of matches along with names for me.
For sure. Now that is your moniker as you are a writer, correct? You just go by singular Umbi, correct?
No, well, I do the full Umbi Solis Flores.
Got it.
Uh, yeah, I'm not like Cher or anything. I'm not that iconic to just go by one name.
You say that now, knock on some wood, shoot. But
I know, right?
I'm so curious about, we talk about cultural identity, cultural
Mhm.
upbringing. Tell us a little bit now how that has, what stage are you with your writing? Now you said you entered the game, what you would call later. Tell us how these kind of all these have impacted to really culminate obviously to your debut
Mhm.
full length collection belonging, but tell us about how just that these experiences, how they now culminated to how you now form and shape as a writer. For a lot of folks, they start writing at very young ages and they see a definite progression. Or some people, they have a similar thread for how they write from when they were younger to how they write now. For you, as someone that was so, you're so mature, you already had that maturation process, and then becoming a
Mhm.
writer a little later, what does that now look like for you? How does that kind of shape itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think since I came to it, well, I say later in life, but now like looking at what year we're in, it's like 8 years later, I
Yeah.
started dabbling in poetry, right? But I think how it matches with where I am now is when I started, it was just a form of self care, and I would just write in my notes app in my phone or in a notebook, and I dabbled in like putting some of those poems in like chapbooks or zines and all that kind of release of things. And then I had a friend who's also a poet, Andy Sanchez. They teach for our community literature initiative. He was like, I'm in this program. I'm really, really, improving and learning a lot in my own poetry and writing. You should, apply. And I ended up applying, and I think I owe a lot of my growth as a writer to the community literature initiative because I didn't have that opportunity to major in writing or all that kind of stuff in college. So uh, that's I think that made my foundation in writing poetry so much stronger, and that led to me being able to write a book in the middle of a pandemic, and going to class every Thursday through Zoom was such a trip,
Mhm.
especially when
Yeah.
we all felt like the world was at a complete stop, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I think to get more to the point, I think me writing later in life, I approached it with more intention once I realized that this was something I was learning to be good and better at, and something that I was like, okay, this could be a book and I want to do a book. When I made that realization, it was more intentional, and I have all these years of experience and years of just going to school, even though it wasn't like writing related, but I knew that if I set this intention and set goals for myself, I can get there and I can do it. So I think that was the difference. I feel like if I had continued with writing stories when I was younger and focusing on that, I don't know where I would be right now. Maybe not even in poetry. So I'm glad I found it later because I can definitely put my intention and my Capricornness towards that goal and what I wanted to achieve.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm also curious, you work as a licensed social worker. I'm
Hmm.
so curious. I mean, I think I really give you your praise. That is the work of angels and guardians. I mean, it really is. It is it's not an easy field and very under recognized and underappreciated. I'm curious, do you see any type of kind of flow in, flow out with that impacting your work as a poet? With what with what social workers deal with daily, do you see how that impacts, or is there any impact for how you write your poetry?
Oh, that's a yeah. When you sent me like the guidance questions, I really thought about it.
Yeah.
Um, Currently, my work is specific for the queer community that are living with HIV and chronic disease. So I don't necessarily apply my poetry to it, just because a lot of the work is very like in the moment, solution focused, and like health minded. But I feel like poetry itself has kind of shaped the way I kind of experience my work. I feel like in many of the books that I found now as an adult with poetry, it's like different windows to different experiences. And I feel like that's the same way I approach the work with my clients. Everyone is different, everyone has a different experience and have different challenges and barriers in just like dealing with healthcare and in the States specifically. It's just so many different issues with it that we can't cover in this podcast. But I feel like that's the thing that connects my work the most, is just seeing everyone and their individual experiences, and just being grateful to be uh, in poetry a spectator and a reader, and in my work also a spectator, but also a support in helping folks achieve whatever their goal is. Um, I recently got licensed, and I am starting a new position that's more clinical and therapy focused. So I think I'm gonna in that position. I feel like poetry is gonna be a bigger source of inspiration in the sense that poetry is so accessible and can be such a great tool, as we mentioned earlier, for self-care, just getting whatever you have inside just out. If you can't verbalize it, you can always write it. So I think the give and take goes both ways with poetry and social work. It's just a matter of where you're at with it.
I'm so curious too for your clients. I mean, do you suggest poetry? Obviously you mentioned so many times it's such a good form of self-care. With the field that you're working in, with your specific clientele and population, have you ever offered poetry as a way for therapy, poetry for a way for self-care, mental health, clarity?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I've had clients, especially the ones that tell me that they like to write or they like to journal. When I catch that when we're talking, I'm like, okay, then maybe poetry is something that you can explore. And sometimes they say, oh yeah, I totally, they've read, the Instagram poetry, or the Rupi Kaurs of the world, where it's very accessible and easy to read, and it just catches you very very easily without having to, you know, you don't have to look in your dictionary, or you don't have to like reread it to kind of figure out what's happening in the poem.
Mm.
Um, so in that sense, yes. Has it worked all the time? No, definitely. Some clients are like, I can barely focus on, keeping my housing or getting a job. I don't have the time to sit and read. So yeah, it depends on person to person, but there's always uh, clients that definitely writing is a somewhat calling for them, or a way to let some of that out. So for sure.
Absolutely. Now, for you, I'm so curious too. You had mentioned just the this idea, the inundation of just the Instagram poetry, the social media
Mhm.
poetry. Where you're at in your poetry career, do you see yourself jumping on that with social media? Um, if you haven't already, what is
Mhm.
your kind of thought process behind the social media poetry of 2024? Do you think it's something here to stay? Something that you want to take advantage of for marketing? What do you think about that whole thing?
I think whatever brings more eyes to poetry, I think the better. Poetry, I think it's such a it's such a gift to us as human beings in whatever experience in life that we have, that I always celebrate it. Um, I mean, I have an audience thanks to Instagram.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily take advantage of it as much as I could. I'm not. While I have like you'll read the book and you'll see like short poems. It's hard for me to get in that mindset of like, oh, let's pick a line and make it relatable,
Yeah.
so folks can like connect to it and reshare and all that. That's I find it difficult to market and capitalize in that sense. Um, but I do consume it, I do absorb it, and I'm thankful it exists because that's part of what helped me get into poetry so late in life. So I celebrate it, but I do question the capitalization of it in a way. I find it hard to mend those two things because I feel like in the States it's very much like how can we use our trauma to kind of sell and brand
Mhm.
ourselves, which is it's very sometimes we have to because we have to survive. So I'm not knocking on anyone that does it. I mean, my book is has a lot of trauma in it, so like y'all as are you listening and you can read me in that way as well. But it's just a very fine line that I have trouble with dealing with at times because I don't want to feed into it too much, but I also want to sell books and be somewhat successful. And I think the main thing is getting my writing out there and hoping it finds the hands of readers that are struggling and have they just have that need of finding a book that they connect to. And I always picture myself going up and going to the library like almost every single day in the summer just to either rent a DVD or find the very small queer section that back then was very very little and very hidden, trying to find somewhat of a connection to someone in the world that has a similar experience. So it's a fine line, but I'm glad it exists because there's many people that need poetry.
Absolutely. You know that you bring up that great point of the trauma porn and how I guess maybe yeah in the United States that's so common with I think it goes hand in hand with Black people of color, marginalized identities, and capitalism.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking, yeah, I've put in so much having to tell your struggle to sell, right? Having
Mhm.
to tell your struggle to sell your story to be able to make money in the arts is so hand in hand with so many of our identities. And I hate it. I mean, I really do. Like, I really, why? What's up with that? I hate it. I mean, to get into college, you have to do that. To
Mhm.
get to even with some of these job interviews, you got to do that. To sell your art somehow, was it Kehinde Wiley? I remember I went to one of his recent exhibits, and I love his paintings, but it was just I mean, I feel like when people see some of these paintings, that's what they're taking away sometimes is just black trauma porn, but it's such
Mhm.
beautiful art, right? It's like why don't we actually fix the actual trauma so we can actually make art that is, reflective of just maybe more positive experiences, but in the same breath I'm also like, well, we can't negate the stories, right? We can't negate people's
Right.
lived experiences. Where are you at? Are you kind of you briefly touched on, but where are you at with that idea of us having to always bring out our traumas to be able to now sell? And obviously you said your debut full-length collection Belonging has a lot of trauma, but for you, where are you at with your art in that? Where are you at with that? Where's your mind space with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I very much relate to everything you said, especially when I go to like art things or other poet readings, and it's very real, but also that's our experience, and that's what we have. Well, not everyone, but a lot of us. That's what we have to express, and just living under such a capitalistic and politicized state, especially here in the U.S. So it's no surprise that that's what we're reflecting because that's the life we have and that's what we're experiencing.
Hmm.
So I don't think that that's gonna change as much until you know well, not to get political, but until like, this country maybe is a different country or different or there's different people handling what's happening, or until
Yeah.
the land is given back to the native folks that are still here.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that maybe is a long shot, but where I am with my writing, I feel I've honestly felt very stuck recently, just with the state of the world, and multiple genocides happening and the ongoing pandemic that's being largely ignored. I feel I'm struggling to find my place in writing about myself and putting it out, and again, kind of selling that
Yeah.
feels doesn't feel right for me right now. So a lot of my writing has been minimal and more for myself and for my phone and my notes app.
Mm.
So I've been focusing more on maybe learning something else. I've always been curious about writing short films and more in that medium of like visual media. So I may just take a break from like writing specific poetry and just using it to build my arsenal of like tools that I have to express myself a little more. Um, but yeah, it feels weird for me right now to put out work that's new and to sell it with so much other things that we need to be focusing on, like protesting and donating and
Yeah.
and being loud of about what's happening, because yeah, we're living in such a failed state that yeah, it's just difficult for me to put any new poetry out, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that idea of stuck, absolutely. I think a lot of people are feeling that right now. Absolutely. Now, moving on, let's talk about what poetry you do have out in the world, and how I'm sure I know a lot of people are affected greatly and loving the work that you've put out. Tell us a bit about your debut full length collection, which you mentioned a couple times already. But it's your debut full length collection of poetry called Belonging. So tell us, it's belonging with B in parentheses. Tell us first off
Mhm.
about that title and what that means.
Yeah, when I was trying to figure out the title, I was having such a hard time. My great, poetry teacher, Kamari Carter Hawkins, was like, "It'll come to you after you have most of it and you read it and kind of get the themes out, right?" And uh, I was like, this state of being, because I write a lot about history and present and kind of a future in a sense. So I was like, there's a lot of me just being and seeking and longing and trying to find a place to belong in the sense of all the themes. So I just put them all, put the word together, and I played around with how we can look at it. And I think there's like multiple titles in one in the way that it turned out for the book. So that was the process specifically with the name. Um, yeah, and with the writing again, I wrote it through the community literature initiative. Um, so that was such a great space to have, especially with when we had the space to share and workshop and have my great classmates give me feedback, and I would give feedback to their work, and it was such a great loving learning space that Kamari created along with the community literature initiative for us. So that was the process. And I guess in touching around like the themes of the book, there's many. I broke it down into I think 6 sections overall, and I start off with some memories and then some poems around just growing up in an immigrant household and being queer and what that looked like and what those memories and my point of view of those experiences were. And also falling in love, falling out of love, falling in lust, and what healing can look like. um, so that's kind of the gist of the book, and what, especially with the title, how that came to be. It was very difficult, but I really love how it turned out.
Absolutely. What's the reception been like for your debut?
It's been so lovely. I've gotten to obviously have the opportunity to be on your show, which is I'm such a fan. I was just re-listening to the Anne Marie Wells episode in the car the other
Oh,
day.
nice. Yeah.
So lovely.
Shout out
Um,
Anne Marie.
Hey. Yeah, it's been great. I think the what's tripped me out the most is when folks in my life and just other folks that have reached out are like, "Oh, I've shared your poem and when I'm teaching in my college course or what have
Yeah,
you," and that's been lovely to hear, but also very unexpected. I never that wasn't my goal when writing a book for like
yeah.
students to be like being shown or taught the themes in my writing. So that's been one of the highlights for sure. And another would be, yeah, when straight people and like cis people reach out to me to like book me in their show or what have you. That's always a good feeling because I feel, and maybe some queer listeners and writers and that listen to the pod can relate. We're usually hired or reached out to just during like Pride Month in June, and then the rest of the year is pretty silent.
Mm.
Um, which, depending on the year, it happens, but for the most part, and as a reception to the book, folks have reached out. Um, yeah, many different times of the year. So I'm very appreciative of that because that's not always the case for queer writers. So um,
Um,
so thank you to them, and thank you to you as well for like inviting me on.
No, absolutely. I think it's one of those things too. You had mentioned just the college course, finding out that someone's just using your poem to teach. It's one of those things whenever I get down, I think that's such an important thing to remember that even if you don't feel like you're where you're at,
Mhm,
someone somewhere is being touched by the work that you're putting out there. I mean, and it's what I think kind of the one of the fatalities of being an artist, being a poet. You don't even realize how many people you're touching with your work because we're in a perpetual state of make the next writer's
mhm.
block. Dang, okay, I'm a failure.
Right.
I'm not meeting up. I'm watching other people. I need to keep it going. But it's sometimes you really do have to relax back and say, You've already made it. Your book, your collection, your poem has already touched a person. That's really, that really is such a win. And I think it's so
Mhm,
important to remember what it seems small, but it's not small at all. Like the fact that people are teaching your work in a class, that's huge. That really, really is huge. For you, do you feel like that where you're not sitting back to really enjoy your flowers, enjoy those big, seems like
mhm.
small, but those big wins? Or do you find yourself on that kind of pathway of just, oh man, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough.
Oh yeah, I'm a Capricorn. Yeah, I'm a Capricorn. I'm a Leo moon for the listeners that are curious.
Yeah.
Cancer rising. So yeah, definitely. I'm like, okay, I achieved this. What's next? And that's just like my own stuff of like always having to focus on what's next and what's gonna for the future. I have a difficult time being in the present, but I think
Yeah, Jesus.
in the reception of the book, it's helped me realize that it's not just about, right now I don't have to force myself to write if I am not feeling it or it's just not the right time or the right moment. And that's part of why Kamari actually sent me like your post of like, yeah, you were seeking folks for the podcast. And I was like, oh, okay, I've been listening and I want to be on there and I want to uh, get back and still celebrate this achievement of belonging, my book. So I think I'm in that process of mending that for me of allowing myself like, yeah, I did something, I can celebrate it, I can share it more in the world, and that's okay. I don't have to always be in my head of like, oh, am I just doing this to sell or perpetuating that whole trauma thing.
Yes.
um
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because yeah, especially for those listening, yeah, we have to celebrate even like the little things, especially now in in this time, especially here in the
No.
states, we have to hold on to the good things that we're doing.
Yeah. No, you and I will talk afterwards. I'm so trying to get on that level. I mean, it's I find it hard. Honestly, I find it hard
Mhm,
because it's one of those things I feel. I wonder again, that's that trauma coming up from childhood, that kind of perfection of trying to be
Mhm.
everything as an immigrant child. But I think more than
Yeah.
anything, I feel like the breach of capitalism hitting my ass. Like, I feel like
Literally,
I
yeah.
need to keep working. I need to keep my product out there. And it takes away from the love of what you do. I'm not gonna lie. I think that's something I've really kind of came across as I've matured into an adult. Like it takes away the love of what you do for sure. I mean, really,
Oof.
it really does.
Oh,
Yeah,
truly, yeah. Yeah, you hit it on the nose there. It really does take the joy of just being in the moment and celebrating what we're doing. I mean, you have such a great show, such a
yeah,
big reach. Like, you should be immensely proud of the work that you're doing. And similar to myself, like I love my book, not to like throw flowers to myself, but I love what I put out. I put so much love and intention and carefulness into what I was putting in the page that uh, I'm glad to be in this space of like celebrating it again. Because yeah, I've taken a long break from like performing and promoting and yeah, for my own sanity, I think. Because yeah, I don't want to lose the joy in something I love so much.
absolutely. No, no, B, I appreciate that those very kind words about what I'm doing, and I think you as well. I mean, your the book, even the artwork, I think you're helping a lot of people. I really do, and I think that this is such beautiful work. I actually want to tell me a bit about the artwork before we move on for belonging. I think that's very central
Yeah,
to the themes of the full length collection. Tell us about the cover work artwork.
for sure. Yeah. So my friend Lorenzo del Castillo, um, he's an artist. I met him years ago when I was in college. And when I would sell my poetry zines, he also had like artwork zines that I
Wow.
would enjoy and support. So I always loved his art style, and I was like, "Hey, girl, like, can you help me out? Like, can you do some art?" So I sent him like not the whole book because it wasn't ready, but like I sent him like a good arc of like here's 20 or so pages of what the main themes are gonna be.
Nice.
Draw out what you feel from that. And he sent me a couple of samples of work, and this just was like, oh, this was just perfect. I was like, this encapsulates uh, the themes in the book so well. So yeah, so y'all go follow him on Instagram. Yeah, his work is amazing, and I'm so thankful that he designed this for me. So yeah, that's how the artwork came about, and then the actual design of it on the page, I kind of uh, just used Canva as a resource of like, I kind of picture it this way, and then the actual like cover designer sent me some samples and things, and we went from there. But the idea was always to have Lorenzo's artwork on here, and I'm glad it happened.
Absolutely. For those that can't see, but it's two folks hugging. We have a son and we have a beautiful rose, a thorn rose, I guess you could say, a thorn rose on the bottom, but very gorgeous artwork right there. So tell us a bit. We've talked so much. We've shared our stories, shared our trauma, but also shared our joy and shared our light. Now, here's to
Mm.
me. I love asking folks this next question because I think it really is it's so unique for each person. But tell me, when did you know you were a writer?
Mm, great question. I knew when I was watching all those horror movies as a child, and I started writing my own little stories, whether they were good or bad or what have you. I think I still have the floppy disk. I'm dating myself right now, where I save those. I don't have anywhere to like put the floppy disk in to actually open it. Maybe one day I'll figure out maybe one of those computer shops that
Yeah,
convert things. Maybe that'll be the way to get access to them. But
definitely. Yeah,
I knew then that I was a writer and that was part of my calling. Whether I suppressed that and you know resurfaced and found it later in life, that was the journey for me. But I knew that writing was something I had in me. Um, yeah, I think that's the moment where I always call back to.
Nice, nice. A horror movie and a floppy disk. That is quite the story right there. No, absolutely. Gorgeous,
Right.
gorgeous. All right, Umbi. Oh my goodness, we've had such a good time as we have traversed across many lifetimes and many moons of this conversation. I think you really opened up, and we really appreciate that. Now I'm going to ask you the finale question we ask every poet that's on the Poet Speaks podcast. Umbi, why do you need to get your words out?
I need to get my words out because I always think of myself in that library looking for books that represented my experience, whether it was my immigrant experience, uh, my queerness. I always had a difficult time in the media here in the States finding that. And that's still true today, unfortunately. And I'm sure that's relatable to many queer folks, queer people of color, all the marginalized identities. It's an interesting life here in the States. So I always think of my writing in that way of adding to the canon of queer and Mexican poets that are doing it and are adding to the canon of work. And I think it's so important, especially with we're seeing so many Black authors and queer authors being banned from libraries and things. I think that speaks to the importance of why I'm still doing this and why I took a break and now I'm back. I think that's why I need to get my words out. So, that young queer child somewhere here in the Valley or in LA or in New York or where have you, if they find my book and they can relate to some of it or see themselves in some way, I think that's why I do it and why I'm so proud of it.
Absolutely. There we have it. All right, Umbi, what's 2024 looking for your writing and beyond? And give us the socials, websites, anywhere and
Yeah.
everywhere that folks can check out the amazing work that you're doing.
What's coming up? Uh, this lovely podcast. What else? I'm my friends, also a CLE alum, Rosalilia. She's having a book release at Truchas coming up in March. I don't have the official info yet. I think she's still working on the promo materials, but if y'all follow me on Instagram at Fotita de Amor, you'll find all the info. You can get my book on World Stage Press on their website. They also have copies of it on Amazon. Chuchas also sells it here in the Valley. Need to replenish the stock. They've been such a support, and I'm so thankful for folks for buying it and selling it out. I promise I will restock. That's in the plan. And what else? Oh, and I know in my bio I mentioned the short film Shadows at Night. That's been a project that my friend and collaborator Kahia here in LA. He wrote it, he directed it. At some point, it's gonna come out. It's a vampire short film mixed with poetry. So that's all in the books, and hopefully we'll have some more info on it as the year progresses.
Absolutely. Tell us what is the Instagram page so folks can check you out or any socials.
Yeah, the Instagram is Jotita de Amor, so that's JOTITADEAMOR.
Perfect. All right. Umbi, thank you so much for being a guest on the Folks Feats podcast. Everyone, Umbi's information will be down below in the description box, wherever you listen to this podcast, no matter the streaming service. Again, in the description box, as well as the link to Belonging, Umbi's debut poetry collection. Now, Umbi, I've enjoyed you.
Likewise.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being a guest on the podcast today. Everyone, go check out Oombi's amazing work. Go check out Belonging. And remember, check out the Poet Speaks podcast wherever you check out your podcast. All right, everyone.